Episode 1 of Romance in the House introduces us to Byung Mi-rae and her mother, Ae-yong. The pair are pretty close and help each other get ready in the morning, although Mi-rae is overworking herself and dozing off every chance she gets. When she makes it to the office though, she soon awakens at the news of their CEO showing up. All the workers crowd into the elevator as their royal secret inspector arrives. Apparently he was just passing by J-Mart, but he finds numerous issues and inconsistencies with the way they're handling matters. That is, until he reaches a tteokbokki stand. Mi-rae holds her own with the CEO, pointing out that her mother, Aeon, is the worker there, and she gives out generous portions because kids are great promoters. The CEO is pretty impressed with their business acumen and even asks for her name. Mi-rae ends up passing out after he leaves and is rushed to hospital. It's clear that she's overworking herself often, and this time she's carried over to the ward. The knight in shining armour happens to be security guard Nam Tae-pyong. He watches over Mi-rae, but while she chills, things take an awful turn. They're called back home as a fire breaks out at apartment 302. Both Mi-rae and Aeon hurry, where they learn Medal, their pet dog, is absolutely fine. Whew, thank goodness. Oh, and also their youngest son Hyun-jae is okay too. Now this fire could be linked to an earlier scene in the episode, whereby a shadowy man showed up at the apartment building. He entered room 302 ominously, and when we circle back to this plot point during the fire, we see someone taken out the building wrapped in a white sheet and stretchered away. It appears to be the previous landlord, but the actual origin of this and what's going on remains a mystery for now. However, some of the residents believe this may be an arson attack, given only apartment 302 was burned. Anyway, they now have a brand new landlord, who apparently paid for the place in cash too. The real estate agent calls the residents to spill the beans and all this, and unfortunately, one of the units will need to move out so the new landlord can move in. As the day closes out, the camera pans over to the apartment where we find charred matches on the ground. Now, the big elephant in the room happens to be Aeon's husband, and the father of this overworked household. Mi-rae and Aeon initially kicked him out, and soon after, news spreads that he died after his bike was hit on the road, probably by a white truck, let's be honest. He passed away at the hospital while receiving treatment. At least, that's what they thought. This obnoxious owner, whom they believe is Oh Jae-gyo, wants to move in himself. This was all signed with the deceased landlord's daughter, so all of this is binding. The trouble is, our protagonists don't really have the money to find another place to live. Aeon also forces little Hyun-jae into silence when a stressed Mi-rae shows back home. She's got enough on her plate, and after debts and bills, she doesn't really have too much left over. The last thing she needs is knowing they need to move soon. The next day, Aeon gets all dressed up like she's a secret agent and decides to meet the landlord's daughter. She slams down a contract renewal extension request and asks her to sign it. However, she can't do so as she's obviously sold the building. The reason she sold it is because she couldn't pay the inheritance tax. However, she's obviously suffering from her father's passing too and struggles to keep it all together. The new landlord offered her a way out and she obviously took it. Now, Unit 301, the lady who tried flirting with the new landlord earlier on, sends over some message asking to stay, and he agrees. She also sends some pics of herself looking all cute, and she's just as surprised that he agreed to this as Aeon is. The other tenant, who has a kindergarten kid, tries to con her way into staying by writing a cute letter from her kid. These ploys are enough for Aeon to throw on the sob story and try to play the sympathy card. As she wails on about her bad situation, it turns out that a man who came to see them isn't actually the landlord, he's just the representative. The real landlord listens to Aeon's sob story about how she's a widow and struggling, but his decision is still up in the air right now. Mi-rae and Aeon have a really close bond, partly thanks to their history. In the past, Aeon was her own Wonder Woman and in her father's absence, did everything to help her. Mi-rae looks up to her mum and the pair have an unbreakable bond. This explains why Mi-rae works so hard for her family, as she wants to repay her mum's sacrifices and debts as best she can. That night, the trio have their annual session of paying respects to their father, and she gives him some encouraging passing words, telling Moojin to pass on from this plane of existence. When they turn around, however, Moojin himself happens to be standing right there. When they lock eyes with him, everything is left on a precarious cliffhanger. Episode 2 of Romance in the House begins back at the villa as our estranged patriarch, Byung Moojin, returns home. The family are shocked to see him, and we soon learn that Jae-gyo is just the agent here. To understand the extent of this messy situation, we cut back in time to 11 years ago. Aeon and Moojin fiercely fight over rights for their kids, but outside the family court, Aeon admits that meeting him is the worst thing that's ever happened to her. However, their children are the one bright spot in their life. Moojin himself is an entrepreneur, and the entire time they were together, he'd constantly come up with numerous ideas, intending to try and make money. Obviously, he eventually struck gold, but how did he get rich? While Hyun-jae is more open with his father, especially as he surveys the damage in apartment 302, Mi-rae by comparison is cold and distant with her pa. She disowned him way back when they fell out, and here she tells him to go through her regarding the apartment and needing to move. Mi-rae thinks about taking out a loan and getting away from the villa, but A-young is not so sure. Unfortunately, their searching is fruitless as nothing really matches their criteria. An entire day is wasted looking at other apartments, but they don't find anything that's worth buying. By comparison, the residents at the villa all start brown-nosing their new landlord, and they're shocked when they find out he's related to Aeon and Mi-rae. One of the residents at the villa, Lee Jung-hyuk, remains vigilant over Moojin though. He's the one suspicious of the arson attack and believes their new landlord could be responsible. Backing up this theory is Moojin himself, who takes out some matches and looks set to light a cigarette. He stops as if entranced, and if you remember, we saw charred matches in episode 1 too. Oh, and Jae-gyeol tells Moojin in confidence not long after that he'll take care of the landlord situation quietly too. Elsewhere, we get a random montage with Nam Tae-pyong as he awakens and gets ready for work. I'm not really sure why we're getting a montage here given we know barely anything about him, but there we go. Anyway, as he shows up at work, he ends up alongside Mi-rae in the lift. Just like in episode 1, he presses floor 10 for her on the elevator, remembering what she said before. Yep, these two are 100% getting into a romance, aren't they? After Mi-rae's ex-boyfriend causes a massive scene in front of everyone outside work, Mi-rae decides to head home. However, she grazes her knee. Tae-pyong shows up to save her again and rides her away on his bike. However, what Mi-rae really needs is to be saved from her rat race. She works so hard and doesn't have a lot to show for it. She decides that night, while sitting with her friend, that she's not going to date anymore. She has a mountain of issues to deal with, and that's just going to compound the issues she has, despite the fact Mi-rae has, seemingly, the perfect guy right in front of her. He also practices Taekwondo in his free time too. Keep this in mind, intrepid viewers, this will come in handy later on.
Spoilers!
Speaking of men, we cut back to Moojin here as he gets dressed after chilling in the bathhouse. Now, he does have a scar up his arm, but the real mystery for the resident stems from exactly how he made all his money. Aeon isn't even a little curious and gives her husband the cold shoulder. That night though, Moojin even goes one step further and allows her to continue staying in the apartment rent-free. It's certainly an enticing offer and would help them out massively, but it also feels like a bit of a betrayal to their principles too. Mi-rae is determined not to take any sort of handouts from their pa, but Hyun-jae is all in with the idea of sponging off his father. He has no shame and he even leaves messages on Instagram about how cool his dad is. After some disagreements on both sides of the fence, that night Moojin sits with Aeon at the local restaurant. She cuts right to the chase and demands to know why he's just shown up out the blue. Moojin eventually admits that he knew they were living there when he bought the place, and it's apparently because he wants to live with her. Moojin has apparently done so much in her absence and he just wants to prove it to her. However, Moojin holds her wrist outside the shop until Mi-rae shows up. Mi-rae's screams bring Tae-pyong out of nowhere like a siren and he smacks Moojin square in the face. Moojin ends up with a nosebleed and Mi-rae jumps in and pushes her dad over, leaving things on a crazy note. We then cut back a day before the fire at the family villa. The landlord ends up outside drinking and dancing about with Moojin. However, at the apartment, Moojin tells him it's over and to stop after he throws something at the wall. What could this all be about? Alas, the plot thickens and we're moving into comedic mystery waters here in a chapter that actually balances out both genres quite well. Both episode 1 and episode 2 do a great job of introducing the family and establishing very early on the dynamics between all of them. This isn't quite a makjang akin to something like Penthouse or Sky Castle, but it definitely has that feel of being an over-the-top drama with wisps of romance and farcical plot elements thrown in for good measure. There's plenty of extreme zoom cuts, and even at the start of the first episode we see Mi-rae out for a run only to find out that all of this was a dream, which is a lovely way of establishing the tone immediately in this drama. The misunderstanding with Tae-pyong and everyone at the end is a great way to end this week, especially leaning into the whole knight in shining armor trope and throwing it upside down. The show also does well to keep this mystery going, and I'm guessing Moojin could be part of a shadowy gang or even part of loan sharks and forced to repay some sort of loan or debt. Either that or it's going to be something really silly like selling paper bags or something akin to that. With all that being said, there's certainly enough in this comedy to make for a really enjoyable watch. And of course the bonus with this being on Netflix is that we get subtitles immediately as soon as this one drops. But let's hope that next week's double bill is just as enticing. Thanks for watching, and do let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Smash a like or subscribe to the channel, your support is very much appreciated. I'm Greg Wheeler, and from all of us over here at The Review Geek, we'll see you on the next video.